Hello, Michael Swain here after Kansas football's 42-31 loss to Missouri here in Columbia. And man, we got a lot to break down with this game. It was certainly eventful in the return of the border war, and I think we're just going to have to work our way through the entirety of the game because that's the best way to cover this whole thing. Starting from the beginning, man, a really poor start from KU, and one that if you wouldn't be alone if you thought, man, is this game headed for a blowout after the first two drives of the game. KU's offense barely could block Missouri on the first drive and ends up 3-and-out punt. Missouri comes back, moves the ball really well. Hardy runs hard, breaks tackles. It reminds me a little bit of, I think, the first drive against Fresno State where KU really struggled to tackle and finish plays. And man, that really showed up for that first drive. But give credit to KU for responding after that. And all of a sudden you blink, and after KU is able to block the extra point, you look up and it's 21-6 in favor of KU. And at that time, just based on the flow of the game, I mean, it looked like it was going to be a smash and grab type of performance for KU, where, you know, KU reminded me a little bit of Oklahoma in 2023, where KU got up early in that game because of an offensive touchdown, but also from a takeaway from Mello Dotson. That was a pick six. Very similar here, where KU is able to get extra points on the defensive side of the ball from a takeaway. Man, great play from Mason Ellis and Blake Harold. Mason Ellis with the hit on Prabula, Blake Harold coming in with the swipe to knock the ball away. Right, great play that leaves Austin Alexander scoring for KU. But then you get to the end of the half, and Missouri really settled in, and KU was not on the field very much offensively in the second quarter. I think that's part of where this game started to shift. You can look at Jalen Daniels' fumble as, I think, one of the big turning points. It ends up in a safety. Missouri comes down. It's a field goal, 5-point swing, but still, momentum-wise, it was critical because Missouri was able to control the clock, keep KU's defense on the field, and really limit what KU was able to do offensively. KU ran one play until I believe there was 1 minute left in the second quarter. That's not good. And you can look at that play specifically. There's a bit of a mishap on the offensive line. Bryce Foster starting to pull, and Tavake Tuikilavatu, the left guard, trips him. All of a sudden, oncoming rusher, unblocked, knocks the ball out of Jalen Daniels' hand. Was it a bat forward? Yeah, probably, but they didn't call it, so it is what it is. And Kobe Baines jumps on it in the end zone. Is that one where you should pick it up and try and get out of the end zone? Sure, but I think he's probably in his own mind thinking, hey, be safe here. And then you get to the end of the first half, and it looked like 2024 Kansas football. KU gets the chance with the ball to go on a 2-minute drill. And poor clock management. Lance Leipold said that, KU should have had better clock management in and of itself. Daniel Highshaw running on the sideline back behind me over my left shoulder. He should have stayed in bounds. Sure, that's on Highshaw. But still, I think you can look at that and say, was that called the way you'd want in that point in time in a game with the way momentum is going? The answer is no. And it's now a theme, and it's carrying over multiple seasons now, where KU really struggles offensively to end halves. And it also carries over to the defensive side of the ball, where, man, KU is just too open and too porous. Hardy has a good run. All of a sudden, guys open over the middle. They're able to get in the 5-yard line, get a field goal. They get the ball coming out of half. It's just, those are the margins in these games. KU's going to play in a lot of one-score games, right? You know that. I know that. It's a part of where this program is at, where week in and week out, KU's going to be in the game. So it's those times at the end of the half when you're bleeding points and bleeding opportunities, that's where games can be won or lost. And in the end, it's an 11-point game, and sure, but the opportunity was there for KU to answer, and they didn't. And then the second half, it's one of those where KU just hangs around, and obviously late in the game, KU takes the lead, and Deshaun Hanukkah, I think, had a great game. KU's tight ends were awesome in this one. And then it comes down to the defense, and just wasn't enough. And obviously, I'm sure you're wondering about KU punting on the fourth down right behind me. Lance Leipold talked about it post-game, said that if KU had gotten one first down before that they would have punted, but they had the 3 timeouts, and so they punted. Yeah, you can make an argument either way. I think given the time of the game and the way that Missouri had moved the ball against KU on the ground when they needed to move the ball, maybe you go for it. I don't know. But KU rolled the dice with that. It doesn't pay off, and in the end, it ends up being an 11-point game. Okay, so that's like how the game unfolds. But what are the takeaways? Well, I think first and foremost, you can look at KU's, I think, defensive line and front six, and I thought they had a very, very solid game. Yes, you can look at the total numbers. No post-game stats. I'm here with my laptop. You look at the post-game numbers, right? You see 261 yards rushing. You think, okay, that's not great. Hardy's run at the end, I believe it was. Before that, KU, I think, had done a solid job of stopping Missouri. It's some of those explosive plays that could have been fixed. For me, the issue for KU defensively is the pass defense. And look, Missouri's wide receivers are really good, right? They're really good players, and they are tough to cover. But all too often, those guys are the ones making huge plays. You can think about the fourth down one and long that's back over my shoulder here. Jalen Todd's on him. I mean, the guy just makes a spectacular play. That's just pure talent. But then there are other times where it's like, man, guys are just wide open, and KU's secondary just wasn't really able to cover. And I think that is the part of the game for me where I say KU could have been better there, and that's where a margin in this game could have been shrunk, and maybe it's a little bit of a different situation. You can look at some of the advanced numbers I've got here. Missouri 92nd percentile in dropbacks. So when they drop back, they're in the 92nd percentile of offenses. Like, it was a stellar performance, I think, for them, and really attacking KU secondary that's young. And so it's a unit that's got to learn, and they will learn over time, but Missouri did a really good job of challenging them. Now, I would say for KU, man, some of those defensive linemen I thought really did flash, and they took advantage of a Missouri offensive line that has some question marks. Leroy Harris, man, he really he stood out to me today. He made a couple really big plays. Tommy Dunn showed up at times too. And, man, Bengali Kamara, I thought Lance Leipold gave a great quote about it post-game. In an era of college football where guys are very ready to put their own self-interest first, Bengali Kamara at the start of the week said he wanted to play. And he got clearance and got checked throughout the course of the week where they made sure he was still healthy enough. But coming off of, what looked like a knee sprain, because he's got a brace on his knee, he plays today. When, this time 7 days ago, people were wondering on the program, hey, is he going to come back this year? And so he pushed through, and I thought he had a solid game. Trey Lathan has been the MVP for KU defensively, I think, through non-conference play. He has been as advertised. He's been better than I think I expected him to be. So positives to take from this game, right? KU's defensive line asked questions. KU's linebackers, the starting linebackers at least, looked really good. And I think it's a question of, for KU, you just can't expect your defensive line to be on the field for that much time, right? I think that's just a key thing. Now, offensively, there are definitely, I think, some questions here. Offensive line-wise, it was a struggle. KU had no run game. Looking at the total stats, KU, I think, rushed for 36 yards total. 31 yards total. It's the fewest KU's ever run for in a game under Lance Leipold. That speaks to an offensive line that was unable to break open holes for guys like Daniel Highshaw or LeSean Williams, and also it speaks to the talent that Missouri has at linebacker, where those holes that were opened up were shut very quickly. And some of those linebackers for Missouri made really good plays. So that for me is a question mark now going into Big 12 play. Obviously, KU's not going to play the Missouri defensive line every week. You don't see these defensive lines in the Big 12, right? It's going to be a step down, but the question is where does the offensive line fall in that spot? We'll have to see, because KU needs its offensive line to create holes, because KU does not have Devin Neal, right, who could turn nothing into something, right? These guys need holes and need gaps to hit, and those just weren't there. And so as a result, KU became very lenient on the passing game. And there were some glimpses of it in the second half that looked really good. The touchdown drive, right, that led to Deshaun Hanukkah. That was a good drive, and it was basically all passing. So wide receiver-wise for KU, obviously Emmanuel Henderson has the big drop. That can't happen. And it was a game that I think came down to scheming guys open. And tight end-wise, KU did a great job. Bowden Gruen shows up. Carson Brune shows up. You've got Deshaun Hanukkah with, I think, one of the better games of his college career. Those guys showed up. But the wide receivers, I think, is a little more up and down. Jalen, up and down, right? He puts the ball on the ground too much. You can't fumble behind me here. Certainly, the play that I talked about earlier, where right behind me that ends up in the safety, that's a little bit tougher on your quarterback, but still got to find a way to get the ball out. So, big picture for KU, where do things stand? This is still a team that's going to make a bowl game. That's my thought about it. That hasn't changed. Now the question is, hey, offensive line-wise, can you be more consistent where you can get a better running game and you can put the onus on other teams, and you can be the one that's controlling the clock and not being reliant on your defense being out there all that much. I think KU's got to figure some things out with its, pass defense. The secondary's got to get figured out. Teams like Texas Tech are really going to try and attack KU through the air. That's a tough game. And so there are some questions for KU coming out of this game, but I think there's also some reasons to be encouraged in the long run. Obviously, you're probably not wanting to hear the encouraging stuff. It's a loss for KU in a rivalry game. That's not positive, but I still think this is a game we learn a lot about KU. And look, there's going to be plenty to go over kind of with the bye week, and this will be a very interesting game, I think, to watch back because, my God, so much happened. So much happened. So that's what I've got. Stay tuned to Fog.net all weekend. Got you covered, even into the bye week, etc., throughout the rest of the season. Podcast coming your way on Sunday. Plenty more VIP content if you're a VIP subscriber. And if you're not, make sure you sign up today. You can join for 60% off for the next year. It's a good deal. You can get all sorts of our VIP coverage of football, basketball, recruiting, all that good stuff. So thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll talk to y'all later.